Good morning and welcome to the second in the series of Dear Mrs Duckie videos. So if you're joining me live or whether you're watching this on catch up on my Facebook page or catch up on YouTube, welcome. I hope that you'll find some handy hints and tips here, and don't forget I will add links to my form where you can send in your crafty conundrums and we will aim to answer your questions and to solve the things that are puzzling you or that you are struggling with. So today, the question is what is tone on tone stamping? I happened to be talking about something the other day and tone on tone stamping, and somebody said, what is tone on tone stamping? So we've ended up with that as our question in our Dear Mrs Duckie video for today. So I have a whole pile of things in front of me. I'm sort of almost semi-organised. Everything could go horribly wrong. But we're going to do a bit of tone on tone stamping, and as before, we're not necessarily looking to complete projects, we're just looking to have a bit of a play and to answer some of those puzzling questions. So I have got in front of me a piece of crumb cake card, and I have also got in front of me a crumb cake ink pad, because the whole idea of tone on tone is really that you are adding the same colour ink to the project, the cardstock that you are using. You are literally using colour on colour. Morning, Michelle, if you like. So tone on tone is really same colour on same colour. Is another way of looking at it, but there are a few ways of achieving it. One is to knock the top off your ink pad. No, that is not it will give you tone on tone, but not probably quite what you're hoping to achieve. So what I've got here is the stacked stone background stamp, so I'm going to ink this up with my half an ink pad. Completely rechanging over my ink pads is one of the things on my wish list, but we have here in the UK, in Europe in general, had supply issues with ink and ink pads, so it's sort of, we're almost, I think, at the end of that particular issue. Hopefully before much longer we should be back on an even keel with ink pads. Let me just put that there. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to lay my cardstock on the top of it, because it is such a big stamp. So if you've never seen me do this before with the background stamps, Stamparatus is quite often the way to go. Morning, Jackie. But I've just laid that on the top. I'm going to put a bit of scrap paper over the top of it, and I'm going to rub. And if we lift that up, we should hopefully have a beautiful tone on tone stacked stone image. So obviously the ink is slightly darker, has come out slightly darker than the card underneath it, because you are adding another layer of colour. So hence the tone on tone, really, because you're adding on another layer of colour. It's obviously going to be a little bit darker. It would be very odd if you didn't change the colour of the card in the background at all, but it is sort of quite muted, quite neutral. Morning, Angie, or evening, Angie, for you. Morning for us here. So that's one use of tone on tone, to create that sort of nice background. So let me just move that stamp to one side. I'll clean that up in a minute. But of course you don't only have to do backgrounds. I've got some mint macaron ink here, some mint macaron card, and I've got the Dragonfly Garden stamp set. So I'm going to take this big wildflower stamp and ink that up. And I'm going to stamp that onto there. So it may be that I want to use that in a background with something else on the front. I could come in again. Let's come in again and do that. Still tone on tone, but obviously some second generational stamping. Slightly paler, that's still tone on tone. So if you wanted to go down lighter still, you could do. So I could use that as a feature image on a card. I could use it again as something, you know, a little bit in the background, because it's not completely in your face. It's really the idea of tone on tone. It's just so useful, particularly for backgrounds and things that you want to sort of sit behind your main image. You don't necessarily want it to jump out, you want it to sit behind. But equally, something like that, something a little bit soft, a little bit gentle, might be quite nice for something like a sympathy card, where you don't want it to be sort of bright and in somebody's face. So backgrounds, Morning Louise, or use it for, and Janice, use it for, you know, whole images. Right, we've got a bit of magenta madness here. I don't think anybody could ever accuse magenta madness of being soft and gentle and in the background. It just leaps, doesn't it, the minute that you see it. So there's no reason why you can't do some tone on tone stenciling. It doesn't have to be stamping. We're just adding the same colour ink to the same colour card. It could also, of course, be, if it was a Magenta Madness DSP, so if it was one of the colour stacks or something, for instance. But I'm going to pick up some ink on my blending brush, and I'm going to come over the top of my stencil here. And obviously at the moment I can see a slight difference, but the chances are you can't. Let's just add that on there, and then when I lift that up, you've got some tone on tone stenciling. So again, just background stuff, things, you know, in the background of your card. It's not necessarily, I think I moved that, it's not necessarily the main focal point. It just is, yeah, it did move a little bit, so it's a bit smushy up there. But you get that general idea. Suddenly that and that looks very different. That looks, you know, really quite classy compared to that, doesn't it? You can see that that's the start of something fun. So, tone on tone stenciling. Now, it may be that you want to do some tone on tone stuff, but you don't have the ink pad. All is not lost. Right, I've got the Love of Leaves here. What leaf shall we love? Let's go big. Let's go this one just here. And let's take a block. Is that one big enough? I think we can just about squeeze that on there. I'm going to take my piercing mat to stand underneath here, because this is a photopolymer stamp. The other way that you can do tone on tone stamping is by using Versamark, because Versamark, if you look at the back just here, it doesn't say I am a stamp pad to put your embossing powder on with. It says I'm a watermark stamp pad. So Versamark stamp pads were designed to give you a watermark type image on your cardstock. And I don't know how well you're going to see that. Can you see that? Just showing up in the background there. So again, really quite subtle, sort of as it hits the light, I can see it better, but really quite subtle. But gives a tone on tone effect. So it's just darkening really the cardstock. By adding another layer of ink, it's just slightly darkening the cardstock underneath it. So he's making it slightly, there we go, that's quite a good shot. You could heat it or just leave it to one side to dry. There's nothing wrong with heating it. It will just dry it up, because obviously, like any Versamark, is always going to be a little bit longer to dry, a little bit tacky, so you could heat it. Do it enough in advance that you can just leave it to one side. So although that's not brilliantly showing up on camera, it really is a subtle sort of background effect. Really nice with those leaves actually. But of course the other thing that you can do, the other thing I grabbed was a little bit of more cherry cobbler, because we can get a tone if you want a sort of a bit more of a visible tone on tone effect with your Versamark. Of course you can take some clear embossing powder. Just grabbed whatever greeting I've got sitting on my side here. And I didn't go over with my embossing buddy. But there we have the word stamping, obviously looking very bright and white. Just put on my heat gun for a minute. And if we just heat up that clear embossing powder, again, tone on tone, just using some clear Versamark and clear embossing powder. So what is tone on tone? It really is adding the same colour ink, or slightly darkening, if you like, the colour of your cardstock by adding the same colour ink or by using Versamark. So we've got a big background, we've got our sort of feature image that we've all done tone on tone. We've done some stenciling just by adding in the same colour ink. We've got our leaves on here by adding Versamark. And then we've got a tone on tone greeting there by adding Versamark and some clear embossing powder. So I hope that's answered the question, what is tone on tone, and given you some ideas of when you might want to use it in your projects and how you can use it in your projects. And I hope that's inspired you to go off and add a bit of tone on tone stamping, stenciling to your next project. So thank you for joining me for Dear Mrs Duckie. Do keep those questions coming in. I've had a few questions come in, so I've still got a few to answer, but I would love to see more coming in, because I'd love to make this a regular feature, and I want to be answering the questions that are conundrums for you in your craft room. So either follow the link that I will put up with this video and fill in a form with your questions, or just send me a message, or if you ask me anything in passing, you might find it turn up at another Dear Mrs Duckie. So have a good rest of the day, and I will be back on Friday with some more crafting.